This is Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. With their furry bodies, huge ears, tiny teeth, and thin, stretchy wings, bats are not always a beloved sight. They screech and swoop, and some do carry rabies. But if you take a minute to get over the ick factor, or maybe in this case it's the eek factor, you'll find that bats are fascinating creatures that play a really vital role in our ecosystem. Vermont's bats are in trouble. Most of the species that live in the state are either threatened or endangered. Today on the show, we're going to learn more about this oft-maligned mammal. It's the final installment of the weekly series we've been running every Thursday in March called Animal Hour, where we learn about some of the animal species that live in our region. We are joined today by Alyssa Bennett. She's a small mammal biologist for Vermont Fish and Wildlife, where she focuses on bats. Alyssa, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're also joined by Barry Genslinger, a licensed bat rehabilitator. He and his wife Maureen founded the Vermont Bat Center in Milton in 2015. They offer educational programs about bats to individuals and schools and other groups and help rescue and rehabilitate bats as well. Barry, welcome.
Thank you very much.
We're so glad to have both of you with us. And listeners, you can join us as well. What questions do you have about bats for our experts today? You can call in at 800-639-2211 or email us at vermontedition@vermontpublic.org. Barry, let's start with you. How did you and your wife first get involved with bat rescue? It's not a common hobby.
No, it's not. But it's an excellent conversation starter at a party. So many years ago, we were sitting out on our porch, and my wife looked up at the overhang on the porch and saw some tiny little things looking down from an opening in the ceiling and wondered what they were. And of course, the opinion was, we've either got to get them out of there because they're probably evil, or we have to learn more about them. So that set us off on a journey to find out everything we could. And once we found out they were such wonderful creatures, we started an organization. We got affiliated with Alyssa at the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department, and since then have just gone wild doing things about bats.
And Alyssa, you've known Barry for a long time, right? You help folks who are interested in bat rehabilitation learn more about it.
Yeah, I was very lucky to meet Barry when I started this work because he was such an expert in the world of bat house building. And that really helped us get the resources we needed to set people off on creating habitat, especially when bats lose the places that they're living in buildings, attics, barns. And Barry has taught me a lot about how they use that habitat because he was part of work years ago with Bat Conservation International testing out different designs.
All right, we're going to get to bat houses in just a bit. We've got lots of questions about them too. But first, let's talk about the bat species that live in our region. Alyssa, there are dozens and dozens of species of bats across the world. Generally, how many and how many live in Vermont?
Yes, around 1,400 different species around the world.
Wow.
Yeah, so they're part of an order called Chiroptera, and that literally means hand wing. And we have bats that are as tiny as the bumblebee bat, really small around the world, all the way up to giant fruit bats that have a wingspan about 6 feet wide. So really huge. But in Vermont here, we have all insect-eating species, all 9 of our species.
Okay. So we have 9. Barry, do you have a favorite? Kick us off with the Vermont bat species.
Well, clearly, the tiny little ones like the small-footed bat and the northern long-eared bat, which are just so tiny and so cute, those are among my favorites.
How tiny are we talking?
No, we're talking really tiny. Some weigh as much as 7 grams. If you think of coins, 7 grams is about the weight of a dime and a penny.
Wow. Okay, so we're talking very tiny. And Alyssa, one of the things that's wild to me that I want to get into it in a little bit is the fact that you do some work tracking bats and have to create little trackers that are small enough that these bats can still fly and live their lives. Yeah?
That's right. So we have to find something that's going to be less than 5% of their body weight. And as you heard Barry mention, that's very small. So these are animals that are, even with all their fluff and fur as small mammals, they are only about the size of your thumb. And in order for us to understand more about how they use habitat, where do they go to sleep during the day, how are they foraging, and what's important for them to be able to live and survive, we often have to follow them around. So we might catch them at night, but they could be anywhere within a couple miles of where they go and sleep during the day. And for us to understand what trees are important for them to protect, how they're using those areas, including water bodies for foraging, we need to track them. And those are very tiny little radio transmitters. So they're sending out a little radio frequency, and then we go out and listen for them.
So Barry mentioned a couple of the species of bats that live here in Vermont. What's the most common species?
Well, before we had a disease that devastated a lot of our populations, I would say the little brown bat was probably the one that people would come into seeing most often because they like to roost in really large numbers, probably hundreds or thousands of bats in barns and structures like that before the disease. But now I would say the big brown bat is one of the most commonly detected around the state, and they do live in structures and have been relatively unaffected by the disease.
And what do bats eat? Do these species all eat the same things?
They eat a variety of different night-flying insects, and in fact, bats are really filling that niche. So you think of birds and other animals as eating insects, especially those flying insects during the day, but then you have moths and beetles that are active in the air at night, and bats are really targeting those species, but it can be a whole different variety of species of insects that they're eating. And in fact, we even have some bats that will glean insects off of vegetation. So we know that northern long-eared bats will eat spiders as well.
Oh, okay. My daughter has been wondering if we can get a pet bat to keep the mosquitoes away. And I said, that's not really how it works. But yes, they do play a major role in keeping those kind of bugs away from going too crazy.
They do. They're great out in your yard, but we do like to let wildlife be wild.
Yeah. Barry, do bats migrate or hibernate? What are they doing this time of year?
Well, of our 9 species, 3 of those species are migrators. They head south. They're smart enough to know that Florida is much nicer than Vermont in the wintertime.
Like many a Vermonter, they make that
Yes,
switch.
they go south. In fact, I happen to be in Florida right this moment.
Oh, Barry.
I know. It's
Barry's a
terrible.
migratory species.
I am. The temperature here is a blistering 85 degrees.
Don't do this to us, Barry.
But the other species will spend their winters hibernating in cool locations, which happen to include people's attic spaces, basements of buildings that they can get into, caves, rock crevices, a variety of places. The important thing being the temperature has to be a constant 50 to 55 degrees. Some species like it a little warmer, some a little cooler. So if they go into your attic, they get underneath the insulation in the attic, so they're next to the warm part of the ceiling on the floor below, and they'll sleep peacefully through the winter until some event wakes them up. Like in February, it gets up to 50 degrees for a few days and then drops back down again, and their nice, steady temperature in your attic is no longer steady. So they wake up looking for another place that they might sleep and end up flying around inside your house.
Okay. Yeah, we've gotten a number of questions about what to do if that happens. But let's stick with their habitats here for a moment. I want to take a listen to a clip from a story by my colleague Jane Lindholm. This was from a couple years ago, and she went into the woods with you, Alyssa, and an intern for Fish and Wildlife. You were around Heinsberg in Addison County, and you were learning about a colony of endangered Indiana bats.
After several miles of walking and wandering, Parabello finds the not-so-poetically named 555 just where she suspected.
So it's that huge tree, and it's kind of dead at the top, and it's all the bark is peeling off. It's like rotting on the inside, so that's kind of ideal for a bat, especially since it's getting sun. Yeah, and it seems like our bat is in there.
Alyssa, how do you identify habitats for bats out in the woods? What kind of things are you looking for?
It really depends on the species.
Okay.
Amazingly, when we talk about those 9 different species, not only do they go different places in the winter, some of them do use buildings in the winter, but a lot of them actually go underground in caves and mines for the winter. And in the summer, we'll find that it's very similar, that they all tend to split up and use habitat differently. So when we have forest-loving species that roost in trees, often they need a place to hide out. They're looking for the same things that you and I are looking for. They want some place that's warm, some place that's dry. So if you find them using a hole in the tree, it's probably not going to be one that's open straight up to the sky from a tree that broke. It's going to be a nice cavity that perhaps a woodpecker started, and then another animal excavated further, and a bat finds a way into the bole of the tree there, and a nice, warm, dry, cozy place to be, where they can then raise their young and know that those young, when they have them, and just like other mammals, they're born with no fur on and their eyes closed. So the moms go out to forage at night and need to leave their pups or young in a really safe place that they can be away from predators. And even for some of our species like the eastern small-footed bat that Barry mentioned that uses rock crevices in the summer, that's where they like to go in the summer. And they're similarly looking for really tight places. So even though they might be roosting among rocks that are even at ground level, you'll find they're going into spaces that are so tiny, only they can squeeze in, about 10 millimeters.
Wow.
So a snake or another predator on the ground can't get in there after them. They're very good at hiding.
Wow. And I can only imagine, too, you mentioned they're babies. If we're talking an adult is the size of a coin with some of these species, their babies must be teeny tiny.
They are small, but amazingly, there are some real differences between this species, or between bats and other smaller mammals that stand out. And some of those are, the babies are actually about a quarter of the mom's body weight when they're born for a lot of these species.
Oh, that poor mom.
Poor mom. And within 4 weeks, they're about her length and size. So that means that she's not carrying them around at night. It takes too much energy. So that's why they need to stash them away, almost like other animals might stash their animals their young in the woods. And some of the other things that stand out are bats are really long-lived. So they're highly investing, often in only 1 or 2 young that they have for the whole year, really low reproductive rate, and yet they'll live into their 20s or 30s. So long-lived, and they're coming back to the same places year after year. So those bats that were up over the porch roof at Barry's house, they've probably been coming there for years, and they'll probably come back for years, and their daughters and their daughters. So generations of bats using those locations.
Wow. Barry, is that one of the reasons that you love bats?
Well, I particularly love bats because they are so fascinating that I have not yet found a group that I have done a talk with that ever ended the conversation and the presentation on time, because everyone that I talk with gets fascinated and we go over time. If we do a school group, it usually gets cut off for the discussion because the school buses are coming and they have to go home, but otherwise they would have stayed. So I try and get people as fascinated by bats as I am.
Well, coming up, I want to talk about some of the threats that bats in our region are facing. But first, we need to take a short break. This is Vermont Edition. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lefrak. This hour, we are discussing everyone's favorite flying mammal, bats. It's the latest and last installment in our weekly series that we've been running this March called Animal Hour, because we all need a little break from the news, right? Our guests are Alyssa Bennett, a small mammal biologist for Vermont Fish and Wildlife, where she focuses on bats, and Barry Genslinger, a licensed bat rehabilitator and the founder of the Vermont Bat Center in Milton. And you can join our conversation too. Give us a call with your most recent bat encounter, perhaps, or a question about bats to 800-639-2211. And I want to bring in some voices from our listeners right now. We have Cassie in Montpelier on the line. Cassie, go ahead.
Hi, I am Cassie. I'm in Montpelier now, as you mentioned. I'm working at the State House because I'm the Vermont State Director for Animal Wellness Action, which advocates for the humane treatment of animals. And we recently learned from a public information request that bats in Vermont are being accidentally captured in glue traps. And glue traps, as I'm sure people are aware, are used to catch rodents or insects but they end up being sticky for everything that comes into contact with it and can kill a whole variety of wildlife, including bats. And so it leads to, we're concerned about it at Animal Wellness Action because it leads to an inhumane death for animals. They injure themselves trying to escape and can die from the stress or simply being without food and water. And we're particularly concerned about the bat issue in Vermont related to that because, as has been mentioned, that so many of the bat species in Vermont are endangered or threatened. And so bats are already facing serious disease threats and low reproduction rates. And it's hard to control those factors, but one factor that humans do have control over is how often we decide to set out traps, whether we make them widely available or whether we even allow them. So they're widely available now. And
Cassie, I'm just gonna jump in here because I really want to hear from our guest Alyssa, who's with Vermont Fish and Wildlife. Alyssa, are glue traps and the harm that they can cause to bats, as Cassie's described to us, are those something that is a cause for concern for you and your colleagues?
Yeah, this is something that we've been tracking and trying to understand how often this happens. First, Cassie, it's great to have a call from you. I don't know if you've seen bats pop up in the State House, but I've gotten calls about them over the years from legislators there. So there are some bats that live right in the State House and might pop in during a session. But glue traps. So Barry can speak more to what it's like to actually try to get a bat out of a glue trap when they come his way. But I have found a number of bats dead in glue traps. And so the tack that we've taken is to try to reach out to the companies that maybe are putting out some of these glue traps, and that can be part of nuisance wildlife or pest control activities. And sometimes they think they're targeting one species, but then they incidentally take another, like bats in this case. And so we've been doing a lot of outreach, and every couple years we host usually a meeting where we invite those folks so they can come talk about the work that they're doing for bats in buildings and getting them out safely, and just making sure that when they're doing any other work that they're not using glue traps, because that really can be, an accidental mortality for bats who are often using those same spaces.
Barry, is there any saving a bat if it's gotten caught in a glue trap?
Yes, and the sooner we get bats that are caught in glue traps, the better. And people that find them that are caught in glue traps should not try and remove the bat by pulling it off the glue trap. That just rips out all of that wonderful fuzzy fur that the bats have. The best thing to do is to immediately call us, and we can get the bat and then safely remove it. It takes a long time to get the bat off the glue trap, and then get the glue off the fur and then dry it out. So over a period of several days, any bat that we get in that was caught in a glue trap, we release and it's fine. It's getting them quickly so that we certainly don't want them to be stuck on the glue trap for days. That I can't imagine a more horrible death than to be stuck on a glue trap for days without food or water, not able to move. And the more you struggle around, the more the glue gets all over you. Just not a fun situation for the bats, and we can certainly help anytime.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that information. It's hard to hear about. Barry, you mentioned that somebody shouldn't try to get a bat out themselves. It might make the bat more stuck. But I also wonder about getting bitten by a bat. Is it likely that a bat would try to bite a person if they're trying to help it, if it's in a sticky situation?
Absolutely, they're going to try and bite. They are frightened. They are in distress, and here comes this big monster that is going to try and grab them. And as far as a bat is concerned, you're a big monster that may want to eat them. So they will strike out. They're in pain, and so trying to get a bat out of a glue trap requires more than just grabbing the bat by its foot and pulling on it. You have to be very careful and take appropriate precautions so you don't get bitten. If a bat bites anybody that's trying to save them, then even if we get the bat out of the glue trap, it has to be tested for rabies. So because rabies is one of those diseases where if you get rabies, you're in serious trouble. Uh, we require that any bat that comes in contact with a human has to get tested. So we want to avoid that by just having the finder cover the bat up with cloth. Be very careful to wear protection on your hands. Gloves are good. And put the bat in a container and get it to us.
Hmm. Alyssa, talk to us a little bit more about the threat of rabies. Do we have a sense of like how likely it is if you do get bitten by a bat that bat might be carrying rabies?
The infection rate is incredibly low in the natural bat population. It's less than 1%. But we do see, of course, the bats that tend to come into the health department that are euthanized for rabies testing because there's been potentially contact with people. Those are often bats that maybe weren't well in the first place. They're flopping around on the floor. They got into somebody's house. So in a lot of cases, we find they're actually just young of the year that have gone the wrong way. They tried to come into the attic and ended up in your living space. But there's also a higher chance. So it's more probably 5 or 6% of bats that come into health departments for rabies testing are positive for rabies. But that's still, we have less bats that show up positive for rabies than other animals in Vermont, like skunks and raccoons. So it just keeps that in perspective. But as Barry said, it's a deadly disease for humans. We take human health and safety very seriously. But unfortunately, a bat will have to be euthanized in order to be tested. So we just want to make sure that we keep people out of that direct contact with bats and keep them safe.
We got an email from Stephanie in Burlington who writes that we often have bats inside our family's summer camp on Lake Champlain in Charlotte. How can we figure out where they are getting in and give them a better alternative place to stay? Many family visitors drive 10 hours for vacation at this camp, and then the bats drive everyone batty. Barry, let's start with you first. How can Stephanie figure out where these bats are getting in?
The best way to figure out where they're getting in is to watch them come out. In the evening, as the bats are coming out, they will exit through the same openings that they use to get in. So if they're on the inside and you want to find out where they're coming in and out, gather some of your friends and stand outside the building and watch them when they come out. It can't be one of those things where you're not really kind of paying attention and every now and again you look up to see if there's a bat there. You have to be focused because the bat comes out and it's gone in 2 seconds.
It's a staring contest. Whoever
Yeah.
can win. Post yourselves on all sides of the building. And you want to be there from before sunset through dusk.
All right. So, go ahead.
Stay there until you don't see any more bats coming out. But once you know where they're getting out, then you know where you can begin the process of keeping them from getting in.
And then once you figure that out, how do you give them a better alternative place to stay, as Stephanie asks? Barry?
Well, of course, the ideal thing is let them go to the neighbor's house. No, not really. We want to put up something like a bat house, a structure near where they're getting in and out of your building. Put up a structure that is properly designed and encouraging for them, and hope that they will quickly discover that and stay in your immediate area. And the best way to do that is to put it up before you do the exclusion from your house, so they have an opportunity to find it, know where it is, and that way when you exclude them from your house, they will suddenly realize, oh, there's a nice bat house here. Let's move into that. And they'll stay around your house and eat your bugs, but they won't be inside your living space.
Anything to add there, Alyssa?
Yeah, I can tell you that we have a really high success rate of placing bat houses where bats are already living in a structure and they're being evicted. So in Vermont, we have a special program where we ask people to report bat colonies to us when they have a number of bats living in a building. And if they happen to have endangered little brown bats, which we can figure out by just asking them to send us a sample of the guano, then we actually are able to provide them with free bat houses. And we've been tracking that over the last decade or so, and we found that when the bats are evicted or not, just putting up a bat house at those known locations is really, really successful. Bats move right in there, even if they're not kicked out of the building. So that can alleviate the problem, even for people who can't afford to fix all those holes and get the bats out. A lot of them move into the bat houses anyway.
Wait, well, we did get one question from a listener named Michelle in Essex, who's having some trouble finding tenants for her bat house. She asks, how do you encourage bats to live in your bat house? I've had one up for a couple years, but it doesn't seem like any bats live there. We do see them flying around nearby at night in the summertime. Alyssa, we'll start with you.
Some of that is location, location, location. So the bat houses don't do well on trees. Although we have tree-dwelling bat species, the ones that are using structures tend to really like those bat houses first and foremost on a building because that holds the heat really well. Second choice would be on a post or a pole, but not too far from maybe the tree line, about 15 feet or so. We've got great guidance on the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department website. And then it's about design, and I'll let Barry talk a little bit about design.
Barry.
Well, the bats, years ago, my wife and I got involved with the National Bat House Research Project, which was a whole bunch of people that were interested in finding out about bat housing. And we built bat houses in every size, shape, color, and design that you can imagine and submitted the results of who was there and what time of year were they there to Bat Conservation International, who compiled all of these results and all of the data. And we found out that openings that are 3/4 of an inch thick, an opening being the space like the space behind the shutter on a window on your house. It's a very narrow, wide space. So if you build a bat house that has that kind of an opening, maybe 18 inches wide and 30 inches tall and 3/4 of an inch thick, that's what the bats like in all of the Northeast. So if we can use that as our base design, we can make a single chamber one that has only one 3/4 inch space, or we can make one that has multiple 3/4 inch spaces. We'll call it a bat condo. And it provides a variety of temperatures and a variety of heights within the bat house so the bats can freely move up and down. And that's the ideal type of housing that the bats like.
Do all bats sleep upside down?
Not necessarily.
Huh.
Interestingly enough, sometimes when we see bats hibernating, we'll actually see them horizontal in crevices or flakes of rock on the ceiling of a mine. In fact, I've even seen eastern small-footed bats and big brown bats, what we would describe as lying on your back is what you would picture being in bed. So they're actually roosting squeezed into this crevice, but lying upside down in the other way, horizontally upside down, which surprised me for sure.
Wow. Well, listeners, tell us what you've observed bats doing in our region. Or if you have a question about what to do if you see a bat or if you find some in your house, give us a call, 800-639-2211. Let's go to Joyce in Essex next. Joyce, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi. Years ago, when I lived in St. Louis and we had an infestation of mice there, my children were appalled at the fact that I threw a living mouse on a sticky trap in the garbage. They took that trap out, Googled sticky traps quickly, and poured cooking oil on the fur and the trap where they were intact. And in a matter of moments, that mouse was released. So I'm wondering if the same would be true for a bat. It's a very humane way to release the creature from the trap.
Barry?
Well, yes and no. The difference is mice are scurrying around on the ground and bats have to be able to fly. If you pour oil all over a bat and its wings get covered in it, its fur gets matted down with the oil, they have a much more difficult time flying. So yes, they might be able to get off the glue trap, but it's going to be extremely difficult for them to take off from the ground and take flight and make it through the next few days. Once we get a bat, we will also use oil to get the bat off, but then we will wash it multiple times over days in regular Dawn dishwashing liquid. And being very careful to fluff up the fur. And when it looks like it's got nice fluffy fur, then we know it's ready for release. But that takes several days in order to give the bats a chance to go about their regular routine of flying and staying warm.
Oh, well, thank you for the suggestion, Joyce, and for that helpful information, Barry. We have Kathy and Orwell calling in. Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Hi, Alyssa. I'm one of your bat counters in Orwell. And I know I've communicated with you in the past about the maternal colony of big browns that I have in my attic. And I'm concerned because this summer I may need to have construction done that would involve a lot of insulating of that space. And of course, that's prime time for the bats. So I'm wondering, well, obviously the first will be just what your advice is about that. And also, I'm curious, what happens with these people who are certified as bat exterminators, quote unquote? What do they do exactly? Are they harming the bats? Are they displacing them, or just finding a way to get them to leave and not come back?
Oh, good questions, Kathy. Let's start with your question about the maternal colony in your attic. You have some construction you need to get done, but you don't want to harm that colony. Alyssa?
Yeah, Kathy, thank you so much for all the volunteering you've done over time. The way that we're able to monitor some of these populations actually is by volunteers counting those bats, like Barry described, coming out of buildings. And if you do that over a number of years, that's how that we know that some of our populations of little brown bats and big brown bats are doing well. So for those bats that are in your attic, the most sensitive period of time is when they have their young. So for big brown bats, they definitely can have their young earlier than the little brown bats and some of our other endangered species, which means they may be giving birth to pups in May, right through June, and then those pups may not be volant or able to fly until July. So we really want to be careful during that time period because disturbance could cause them to abandon their pups or may seal the mothers out, but the young will be trapped inside because they can't fly yet. So when we think about summer, if there's any way of pushing that work maybe towards later in the summer or something like later in August, that would be the best avoidance measure. At the same time, I would suggest putting some bat houses up there because we know that all of our bat species, they actually bounce around between a number of different roosts in a network. So they don't have just one home. They're more like Barry. They go somewhere else for part of the time. But they might be switching roosts every day, every couple days. So if you provide them some alternatives and you start making noise in that space when you're starting to do construction, they'll probably have a chance and they can actually move their pups. They don't fly with them every night, but they can actually move them if there's a gentle disturbance before you start tearing things apart.
Well, thanks, Kathy. And I'm going to throw your second question to Barry. It was about bat exterminators and what exactly they do. Barry?
We don't, as far as I know, we don't license or recommend on the Fish and Wildlife website bat exterminators. We recognize people who have been properly trained as bat exclusion experts. They know how to properly exclude the bats without harming them and without interfering with the pups during their critical time. So that's very different than being an exterminator.
All right. Well, thank you, Kathy, for calling in with those great questions. And your first one about the work being done in your attic reminded me, Alyssa, that I heard that you were recently inspecting homes that had been flooded whose owners had applied for FEMA buyouts, and you were checking that bats and their young weren't using those empty buildings as shelter before demolition. Can you tell us a little bit more about that process, what it entails?
Yeah, we do have not only some state-listed species that are protected under our State Endangered Species Act, we actually have 2 species and a third that's proposed for protection under the Federal Endangered Species Act. And that means whenever projects are on federal lands, carried out by federal agencies, or getting funding federally, so when we're thinking about these projects, it's the Federal Emergency Management Agency, that those actually have an additional level of scrutiny. And so we at the state level try to partner and help out and provide our local expertise. And in this case, because there's federal funding paying for those buildings to be acquired and demolished and then turned into green space, I wanted to make sure that we went in there before those demolitions like we would with our other regulatory review and find out if bats were using them. So I'm kind of poking around in people's attics looking for bat droppings and signs like that. And I've done over 100 of those so far and have help from a technician in southern Vermont. And we have found bats using about 15% of the structures. So that just means that we would ask that the timing of the demolition, just like the evictions, doesn't happen when bats are in there with their young.
Well, we need to pause here for one more break. Before we do, though, I want to let you know that right now is Vermont Public's spring membership drive. And when you make a gift to Vermont Public, you are funding trustworthy news and education and entertainment and programs like Vermont Edition. We're asking you to support the fact-based reporting and the quality education and entertainment with a donation right now. It really means a lot to the work that we do here. You can give on the Vermont Public app, online at vermontpublic.org, or by calling 800-639-6391. Okay, more Animal Hour in just a minute on Vermont Edition. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lefrak. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the magic of bats. It's the last installment in the weekly series we've been doing this March called Animal Hour. Our guests are Alyssa Bennett with Vermont Fish and Wildlife and Barry Genslinger, a licensed bat rehabilitator and founder of the Vermont Bat Center. Alyssa, we have not really talked much about one of the biggest threats to bats right now, which is white nose syndrome. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
White nose syndrome is a fungal disease, and it's something that was not here before. So it's what we consider an invasive disease that likely came from Europe or Eastern Asia, where it's been found. But what we see over there is that it's likely been there for maybe hundreds of thousands of years, and bats have likely co-evolved with it. When it was introduced, probably accidentally by people over here, because we like to travel and go underground and explore places, it was really novel to our bat species. And like some other things you may have heard of, like chytrid fungus, which affects amphibian species, this is a disease that affects a whole spectrum of different species of bats here in Vermont. But what is complex about the disease is that it affects them all differently. Big brown bats that are still doing well all over Vermont and in people's attics don't seem to be very affected, and they seem to be pretty resistant. Then we have little brown bats that were so prolific before the disease that they may have had the genetic variability within the population that even after 90% of them died within a year or two of this disease, they've been able to stabilize at a low population level, and we have hopes that they can recover. And then on the downside, we have species like the northern long-eared bat, and we can hardly find them anymore in Vermont. And there really is a big concern that that species really is still on the brink of extinction.
Wow. What year did this happen? When exactly did that shift occur?
It was first discovered in New York State in 2006, and then by 2008, 2009, we saw it here in Vermont. And we had no idea what it was at the time, but we just saw carcasses of bats showing up in the sites where they hibernate in the winter, because this fungus affects them when they're in that state of torpor and they're saving energy. Their immune system's basically shut down, so the fungus really sets in on their exposed skin tissue. And for bats, that's a lot of wing tissue that's only a few skin cells thick. That fungus sets in, it causes them to arouse too frequently in the winter. They burn through all of their stored energy, they dehydrate, and we'd see them flying out in the landscape and showing up even at those summer colonies in January. Wow. And just dying on the landscape. It was very sad.
Barry, were you already working with bats when white nose syndrome hit the populations here? What do you remember about it?
What I remember, we got a number of bats that were impacted by the white nose fungus that came from a cave in near Dorset, Vermont, and they were brought to us with clear evidence that the fungus had impacted their wings. They were found outside of their hibernation cave and were in grave condition. They were starving. Their wing tissue had started to deteriorate. And for a number of attempts when they were brought to us, we worked day and night trying to make sure they had food and water and everything that we could do. And the disease gets so entrenched into the tissue that no matter what we tried, we just weren't having any success, and they all of the ones that we initially got in ended up dying. But then we tried some experimental things. Later found out that betadine, which is an iodine solution, can be used on the wing tissue to stop the impact of the fungus. And we were actually able to do a series of photographs of one of the little brown bats that we got in, whose wing tissue had fallen all apart. They had nothing but bone tissue, or bone and a little bit of tissue left, and it started to grow back.
Hmm.
And Alyssa had the pleasure, after several months of rehab for these bats, she had the pleasure of taking one of them back to Dorset Cave and letting it go. And it uh, took right off from her capture bag and flew right back into the cave. It knew exactly where it was and where it was supposed to go.
Oh, that must have been heartening to
It
see.
really was.
We just got an email from Mark who writes, several Februaries ago when white nose syndrome was ravaging bat colonies, I witnessed the heartbreaking sight of seeing a bat flying in falling snow in broad daylight. I learned that white nose syndrome irritates the bats and prevents them from hibernating because they burn critical calories from scratching and not sleeping, and hunger forces them out of their hibernation much too soon. I will never forget that sight or the helplessness I felt from that scene. Alyssa, is there anything anything else that people can do if white nose syndrome makes a resurgence?
Well, so I would say it's here and it's here to stay. And unfortunately, some of those species I was talking about that are heavily infected, we see them tolerating the disease, but they aren't resistant. So they go in each winter, they still get infected with the fungus. Somehow they're making it through at a population level, but many individuals are still dying. So the primary thing people can do during that fragile time is to make sure to leave bats alone. So we love going and exploring in those underground spaces. They are so cool, especially when it's 40 degrees in there in the winter and it's about 10 degrees outside. That's lovely. But the bats really need to save all of their energy. So please don't go underground to places where bats are hibernating in the winter. They need to be left alone. And then really we need to do everything we can do to support them the rest of the year. They come out in the spring, they fly back maybe to your bat house. And so we need to make sure that they have places they can go that are stable and they can raise their young and they have a chance to make it.
Well, let's get in a couple more voices from our listeners. We have Alex calling in from Brattleboro. Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I grew up in Westminster, West Vermont, and my folks had a house that was from 1776, and of course it had a bunch of holes in it, and the bats would come in the summertime, especially when everyone was having dinner, and the bats would fly around and have dinner also. Nobody was bothered by them. In fact, everyone just really loved having them around, and they were coexisting very peacefully.
Wow. Well, thanks for telling us about that. And wow, a farmhouse from 1776, an auspicious year. We also have Janet calling in from New York. Janet, go ahead.
Hi, I had a cat once in my apartment and a bat at the same time that was flying around, and the cat caught the bat. And it was a beautiful vision to see, but cat let the bat go, and then I let the bat out of the apartment through the window. And I was just wondering if there are any animal predators on bats.
Alyssa?
Yeah, that's a great question. And if you think about when bats are most active, they're active at night. And so when we think of them being in the sky, owls are their main predator.
Owls. And it sounds like also maybe things like humans and disease and climate change too.
Yes.
Yeah.
We also get a number of cat-caught bats
Really?
into rehab, where a cat has caught them. The bat is lying on the floor, and the owner covers the bat with a container, gets them to us. And one of the issues that we have to deal with all the time is the bat exteriorly appears to be fine, except for some little minor punctures that we can treat. Unfortunately, they are so delicate that we often can't do anything to help them because they have internal organ damage just from the crushing, biting, or playful bantering that the cats do. So we will often have a bat that comes in and treat it for several days, and then all of a sudden there it is dead on the floor of the container. So
Oh, it can be a cruel world out there for these poor bats.
it is.
Wow. Barry, you and Alyssa both approach bats from this place of curiosity. I'd love to hear if you two have any advice on approaching bats, learning about them with curiosity instead of fear, because this is definitely a type of animal that really scares a lot of people. Barry?
Well, those that have a fear of bats are the ones that we love to do programs with, because by the time we're done, they have a whole different view of what bats are all about. And we try and undo the fear that Hollywood has taught us about bats and the way they all fly and attack you and suck your blood and Dracula and all of those crazy things. And during a program, we can clear up any of the misconceptions and myths about what bats do. So that is a group that we really loved doing programs with, as well as school groups. Back in the early days when we started doing programs, we tried to travel to all of the places that wanted programs. But in Vermont, that takes us an hour, 2 hours away to do programs for schools. And then along came the internet and Zoom. And holy smokes, that gave us a whole new way of reaching people. We could actually go into their classroom and do a program without leaving our office. So we have done hundreds and hundreds of programs over the years for organizations and individual groups and classrooms all over the state of Vermont, and actually in Maine and Pennsylvania and a number of other places.
All right, I have to share, our producer, Andrea, who put together today's show, is one of those people who has a deep-seated fear of bats. I asked her if she feels better about them after talking to the two of you, and she said, yes, I don't want to meet them, but I have a better appreciation of them. Alyssa, what would you say to somebody who is scared of bats?
Well, I think first I try to validate their fears. It's really understandable. This is an animal that, as tiny as it is, normally when people have an interaction with it is in the middle of the night when they're a little bit groggy. So it's quite a surprise. If you're not used to being around bats, you're not really sure how predictable their flight pattern is going to be. And so it's very surprising. Of course, it's probably dark out, so that doesn't help either. So like Barry mentioned, the more that we can help people understand them and learn about them, the less scary they are. But really, I would say a big dose of empathy coming from all of us who understand bats when we're working with people, just to validate that fear.
Yeah. Well, we started out this hour by talking about all the different varieties of bats, the different species that live all across our world. I'd like to bring us back there because we got a question from a listener named Cassia. Well, actually, the question's from their daughter, Celeste, who's a third grader at Union Elementary School in Montpelier. And Celeste wants to know exactly how many types of bats are there in the whole world. Barry, can you tell us?
Well, there are 1,400, give or take a few, different species of bats, ranging in size from about 3/4 of an inch tall to the fruit bats that weigh 2 pounds and have a 6-foot wingspan, and everything in between.
Incredible. And Alyssa, what is your favorite bat fact?
Oh my gosh. I think the fact that they're so long-lived is usually the big surprise to people. But when I started studying bats, I wondered how can they hang upside down and even sleep upside down and hibernate without getting a headache? So just understanding that the system that we have in our legs that keeps the blood from pooling down at our feet is the same that bats have. So they just have it in reverse, and that keeps the blood from pooling in their head. And I thought that was fascinating.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing your understanding and appreciation of bats with us today. Alyssa Bennett is a small mammal biologist for Vermont Fish and Wildlife. Alyssa, thank you.
Thank you.
We are also joined by Barry Genslinger, a licensed bat rehabilitator and founder of the Vermont Bat Center. Barry, thanks so much for joining us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You can find our other Animal Hour shows on the Vermont Edition podcast feed. There's one on sheep, big cats, and beavers. Every Vermont Edition show takes a team, and you are on that team. When you make a gift to Vermont Public, you are funding trustworthy news, education, entertainment, and programs like Vermont Edition. It's our spring membership drive, and we are asking you to support our work with a donation right now. You can do that at vermontpublic.org, on the Vermont Public app, or by calling 800-639-6391. And thank you from all of us to everyone who has already made a gift. Today's show was directed by Aaliyah Papes. It was produced by Andrea Lorian. Our call screener was Rick Barrett, and our theme music is by Myra Flynn. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch up again soon.